Ay, dumating na si Jingle. Sandali, ha? Sandali lang, ano ko na lang yung santay, tapos yung blood pressure. For those na yung na-late, katulad ni Leah at saka ni Angel, ang diniscuss namin na kanina yung ADL at saka itong vital sign. Inulit ko yung vital sign kasi alam ko na kailangan ninyo and gusto kong ma-exercise nyo yung ma-memorize yung vital sign kasi yun ang pinaka main purpose at mamamaster nyo yung pagba-vital sign once na na-expose kayo sa OJT ninyo and kailangan alam ninyo pagkuha ng vital sign, body temperature, pulse rate, respiratory at saka yung blood pressure. So kasi may mga feedbacks na na hindi na willing naman daw ang mga student na mag-aral ng gano'n na masipag, pero yung mga theory nakakalimutan na. So gusto kong i-refresh yung theory na pinag-aralan nyo last time para hindi nyo makalimutan. And one thing else, they advise ko, in case na at least you have your like for example, BP apparatus already with you na pinagpa-practicean na ninyo para pagka dating ng time ng return demo ninyo, hindi na kayo nangangapa. At saka kahit na anong gawin mo, kasi kadalasan yan pagka mangangaka pa. Pero at least kung meron ka na ngayon, pinaghandaan mo na you will be ready for patient already. So, ngayon sa blood pressure tayo and patapos na tayo pero thank you so much, at least humabol yung si Leah at saka si Angel. Ay, Angel, hindi si Jingle. Punta tuloy naging Angel siya eh. Kanina pa yan. Ay, hindi na. Now, andito tayo sa heart sound. The first sound of when you get for the blood pressure, it occurs the beginning of ventricular systole. Ito yung first sound na naririnig nyo. Ito yung sinasabing systolic sound, which is caused by the closure of the tricuspid and mitral valves. And the last, yung second sound na maririnig mo, the beginning of ventral diastole, and it is caused by closure of the aortic and pulmonary valves. So ayan yung parati natin pakikinggan. Once na tayo, kumuha tayo ng blood pressure ng patient natin, we must first hear yung first sound na patandaan mo at saka yung last sound na maririnig natin. Now, yung arterial blood pressure or the blood pressure, it is a pressure from that measure the pressure exerted from blood as it flow through the arteries. Ayun yung arterial blood pressure. There are two blood pressure measurement that we have, which is the systolic pressure. Ito yung maximum pressure that developed on injection of blood from the left ventricle to the arteries. Ito yung systolic. And diastolic pressure is the lowest pressure as it measures from the peripheral resistance. Actually, ito yung first and sound na sinasabi ko kanina. First and last sound when you are getting blood pressure of the patient. Now, in measuring the BP cuff, you could do it by means of auscultation. yung pag mo, hindi yung i-auscultate mo yung patient. A systolic pressure is taken at the point when the beats become audible. So, pag narinig mo yung audible sound habang nag-auscultate ka ng blood pressure mo, ayun ay tinatawag na systolic pressure. Pag may narinig kang first na dug, gumanon na, ayun na yung audible sound, yun yung systolic pressure. And as the mercury continues to fall, the sound of beats become louder and gradually diminish until the point it reaches when there is sudden mark of diminution intensity. Yung average blood pressure nito ay 120/80 at age of 20 years old. And at the age of 60, ang normal na nila is 160/90. Now, ito yung example ng aneroid thermometer natin with stethoscope. And we have also parts of the sphygmomanometer. Ito yung black na thing na yan. Ito yung cuff and the stethoscope. And we have also the tube of the sphygmomanometer that connects sa pinaka-bladder niya. And then we have also the valve and the bulb. Ayan yung parts of sphygmomanometer. And when taking blood pressure, it is measured the blood pressure cuff on sphygmomanometer and stethoscope. The blood pressure cuff has a bladder. It can be inflated with air. It covers with cloth and has 2 tubes attached to it. And sometimes there are 3. One tube is connected for the rubber bulb and to introduce air, and to the valve clockwise, and it releases the air, and to the counterclockwise. The second tube is for the sphygmomanometer, and then the third is the stethoscope. Now, the first thing you have to auscultate method of obtaining the blood pressure. First, the health provider or the nursing aide must determine the cutoff sound. Yung cutoff sound, this is the series of sound that can be heard during the BP assessment. Ayun yung cutoff sound. And the phases of cutoff sound, the first phase is the first clear tapping sound is heard. This is sound gradually become strong and deep. And the second sound is the period of deflation when the sound have wheezing quality. So, yung cutoff sound, ito yung series of sound that can be heard in blood pressure. And it has different phase. We have phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 3, phase 4, and phase 5. Yung phase 3 naman, the period during which the sound is forcefully and powerful. And yung fourth naman, the time of intensity that has less pounding. And the fifth is the pressure level within the sound, it will be disappear. So, ito makakategorize mo yung different cutoff sound na yung first clear tapping ma-heard mo, yun yung systolic, and then the period of deflation, yung sound nagiging wheezing quality siya, and then hanggang nagiging strong siya, hanggang nagiging intense na siya, hanggang yung pressure niya ay bumababa na until it disappear, and that's the diastolic. In reading the blood pressure, the first sound can be heard systolic pressure, and the last sound can be heard as diastolic pressure. Ito yung mercury thermometer and the cuff of aneroid thermometer and the cuff. Ito usually yung mga manual na ginagamit natin for taking the vital signs, which is mas maganda yung manual or aneroid thermometer and the cuff. Now, there are types of sphygmomanometer. Aneroid and mercury manometer or aneroid is a calibrated deal with a needle that points at the calibration, while the other is calibrated with cylindrical filled with mercury. And then the other types also, which is electric speedometer, and Doppler stethoscope. Now, the variation of cuff of BP apparatus, if the bladder is too narrow to obtain the blood pressure reading, it will be erroneous and elevated. And if it also wide, the reading is enormously very low. The width should be 40% of circumference or 20% wider than the diameter of the midpoint of the limb which is to be used. The length of the bladder should be sufficient long almost circle the limb to cover at least 2/3 of its circumference. So, ayun yung variation ng cuff. Pag masyadong narrow siya ang makukuha mo, mali din siya kasi masyadong mataas. Pag masyado naman wide, malaki, ang magiging din siya, mali din siya. Kasi ang makukuha mo ay mababa. Pag ang width niya ay 40%, sa circumference or 20% ang wide niya in diameter, yung pinaka-midpoint niya of the limb which is used. And you will get the right blood pressure for the patient because it encircle the limb and cover at least 2/3 of the circumference. There are variation of taking the blood pressure by age. Yung age niya for a newborn baby, you could get a blood pressure of 73 to 55 millimeter per mercury. And for the 1-year-old, ang blood pressure niya na makukuha mo, minimum niya is 90/55. And yung 6 years old, ang makukuha mo na minimum mean of blood pressure niya is 95/55. Yung 10 years old naman is 102/62. And yung 14 years old, you could get 120/80. And for the adult or normal adult, you could get 120/80. But for the elderly over 70 years, you could get diastolic pressure may be increased. So, mas mataas na, especially when the patient may present condition. Like for example, mataas ang BP niya, mataas ang cholesterol level ng pasyente, medyo din yan, erratic din ang pagkuha ng blood pressure niya. And also, kung meron siyang cardiac problem, ganun, medyo mataas pag matanda na. Mataas din ang makukuha mo ng blood pressure kung ang pasyente ay pagod. So, before taking the blood pressure of the patient, you have to ask them to take a rest. Magpahinga muna sila bago sila makuha na ng blood pressure. So, that's all for today. Thank you for listening. May mga tanong ba?
Wala pa mo.
Wala?
Pwede po pa-share ng slides sa group?
Ha?
Pwede po pa-share ng slides sa group?
Oo, isi-share ko na lang yung Yung isa kasi, ayusin ko muna. At least eto pwede ko nang mai-share kasi may skills siya. Yung isa kasi hindi ko pa naayos. Kung pwede, bukas ko na lang ibigay, ayusin ko na lang. Total wala naman akong pasok. Ayusin ko na lang yung slide. Okay lang?
Sige po, ma'am.
Ayusin ko muna. Kasi medyo yung isa hindi siya gaanong maayos. And gusto kong i-share kasi wala si Leah kanina at saka si Jinger. Sana every meeting, huwag kayong mag-absent. You try to, kahit na humabol kayo kasi sayang yung information na makukuha nyo. Kasi right now, masyadong in demand ang mga healthcare. And kahit na sa ngayon kasi lalo na sa COVID or kahit hindi man COVID, marami na ring mga kumukuha sila ng mga caregiver or kaya mga nursing aid na well-skilled. So, kunwari, ngayon nag-aaral kayo. Tapos, pagdating ng affiliation kasi ninyo, merong mag-evaluate sa inyo. So, in case na hindi kayo nakasagot or anything, hindi kayo ipapasa. Kasi during that time, pagka, ma-evaluation bago kayo pumunta ng affiliation ninyo, kumbaga i-revalida muna kayo kung pwede na kayong pakawalan. So, may mag-ano sa inyo, may mag-rate kung pasado na ba o hindi. At least, gusto kong makapasa kayo kasi kung hindi kayo makapasa, it will reflect kung may natuto ba kayo, may napag-aralan ba kayo, tama ba yung tinuro ko, ganun. So, I encourage you na kahit na late na kayo, pumasok kayo, humabol kayo kasi sayang din. At saka, yung mga ganitong opportunity, blessed kayo kasi yung sa mga ibang matataas yung mga yung fee, ganon. Eto, out of courtesy at saka tulong ni na Ma'am Maricar sa atin, parang giveaway na nga niya yung natin. So, natutuwa ako sa kanila kasi for their, yung sa puso nila ng pagtulong sa kapwa. So, I just hope na lahat kayong maka-attend meeting kahit na date na kayo. Pero pag hindi naman kayo makarating, i-inform mo kami, at least mag-message kayo para pwede nang mag-proceed yung natin, yung grupo natin. Tsaka isa pala, nire-request ko sana mag-uniform kayo during digital meeting natin. At least kumbaga sa confirmatory na tayo na okay na tayo na in the near future puti na yung susuot natin. Ano pa ba? Kasi may sabi daw kasi pag nakadalawa ka na ng absent, it will be fail or you will transfer or you will go back for the from the beginning you are failed, parang ganun ba. So ayoko naman na ganung mangyari. At least kahit na late kayo, you could still make up rather than yung totally nawala. So kahit na late kayo, humabol kayo. Okay lang po ba? Pasensya na po ka. Baka magtampo kayo sa akin. At least na-inform ko na kayo. And if there's any problem, kung may mga katanungan kayo, you could ask me. Or kung hindi ko kaya, kung hindi solve ng ko, we could ask sina ma'am. Pwede tayong tulungan. So, yun lang po. May mga tanong pa? Wala na? O, sige, okay. So, by next week, magsisimula na tayo sa yung mga nasogastric o kaya basic wound care, application of elastic bandage, mga ganun na for level 3. And thank you so much for the time. Lizelle, na lang yung attendance, ha? Apo, thank you. Thank you, Jingle, Lizelle, Leah, Laila. God bless. Kumpleto na ba yun? O, tama. Jingle, Lizelle. Thank you. Ma'am, thank you po. We are done.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Good night. God bless.